and welcome to Technique Friday. I had a request from a number of subscribers that wanted me to show them how I draw eyes. And look, to be honest with you, I've done a lot of different classes that taught me how to do eyes heaps of different ways. And my way of drawing eyes, I'm just going to show you a whole heap of different ways of drawing eyes, because honestly I'm not going to go particularly in depth, because honestly if you really want to draw eyes and faces really well, you should pay to do a course. I'm not the sort of person that will try and usurp somebody else's course, and there's so many good courses out there and I've done quite a few of them to help you along in this process. So I'm going to start basically by just teaching you some basic shapes. So the basic shape of an eye goes down a little bit and like that. That's very long. I might actually do this in a black marker just so that it's easy to come out. So an eye, let me just do that in a black marker. That's a very long eye. And when you do your eye, if you were to do your eye as flat as that, your pupil, unless you wanted to have your eye look extremely surprised, would be sitting something like this. And then you would decide where that's the iris, and then you would decide where the pupil went. I'm just going to put it in the middle. I tend to make my pupils that little bit larger, and I tend to have a little highlight in them. Now if you do a flat eye like this, you can always add extra things in. So there's the bottom lip. Now the bottom lip is where your eyelashes come out of. So if you've got eyelashes that come out like that. And then you have an eyelid, and the eyelid follows the eye somewhat. And then you have an eyebrow. And depending, you can have it high or low. Right? And this eye looks reasonably normal, but you then have your eyeball, which is about this sort of thing. And then you have shadows often, or marks, that go at your iris. And you have shadows here too from the overhanging lid. And then you have lashes, and you can choose to do your lashes as long or as short as you like, and as far over as you like. Now that's a basic eye. Now there are ways that you can do eyes that are orientated on a face differently. You can do open eyes, so you might go for a really open feel where you've got and you know that this eye here, even if you draw the lid in like that and across, that eye looks really open and really surprised. Right? And if you're doing all the same things with the way the bands come out from the irises, and you've got the same things happening here, and you've got your little bits there and your eyes coming down like that, you've got the same sort of thing happening, but that eye looks much wide open than that. Now Tamara Laporte does eyes starting off like this, and then she will shape them and uses pencil. But there's a couple of basic ways that you can do eyes. You can have your eyes coming out like this to the edge of a face, in which case your eyes are very large, And I make my eyes very large when I'm doing something like this, and I always have a very large pupil when I'm doing that, but that's just me. It's up to you how you want to do that. Now that eye there is really right at the edge of her face, and the lashes will come out from the side of the face. And features will come from that. But you could do eyes, if you were to say, let us just draw a grid. And we've got a rough face. Now the basic thing to make any eyes believable is to have roughly the same amount, the same width in between each of them. So if we're looking at width, say this is the width of the eye, and that's a pretty even thing. So I make my eye, I use something like this, and I make my eye go there to there, and then I go across here, and then that's the next line. This is when you're really new. I tend to eyeball it, right? The whole point is you can do your eyes any which way that you like. You can start them any which way that you like. However, to get them believable, you need to make them orientated on the face in the right spot. I often draw lines through mine here, and then I start drawing in the eye there. And this time I'm going to make this person be looking here, and you can see already that there's further expression. I might make them do this, and then not only are they looking there, but they're looking a little bit worried. Add some lashes in, add the further line in down here, all lines here, and you start to get some sort of a sense that there's an expression on this face. And I don't know what you would think that expression was, but it's a different expression from an expressionless face. And I think when we're drawing eyes, we just want to make them believable. So you could draw really, I mean, there's really big eyes. So we have some really big eyes where we have eyes that are maybe laughing. So eye that might be laughing and be crinkled. You could have eyes that are very wide open. Like I've shown you an eye that's quite wide open and looking surprised. Someone that's looking angry, you could have, again, let's do the cross. And on a face, if you do a cross that's the middle, your eyes are always in the middle of the face. So we often think our eyes are in the top third, but they're not. They're in the middle of the face. So if you're just doing a round face, right, and your eyes are in the middle, you can make your eyes round and really really different, and you can space them right to the edge of the face, and if you space them closer, I'm actually going to do some eyes that are like huge. But because I'm making them believable with my spacing, they will be. And these are more like anime eyes. And those eyes are still believable, and they look almost a little bit sad. And if we just put a few little lashes that follow this downward trend of the eye, it gives it a different look again. And you could have a small nose sitting here and a small mouth. I always tend to draw my noses in a certain way. And you've already got a believable kind of a face happening there, even though this mouth, because I've done this line a little bit differently. But those eyes are big and wide and open, and you could have a completely different look to something like this, right? And more of an anime kind of a look. I guess the basic principle that you want to understand with your eyes is that the most important thing with eyes is that you need to think about where they're orientated on the face. And if you have an eye that you just do like this, and then you draw a pupil, and say you draw it like that, and you draw it this like this, and you might even put a few bits and pieces in it, immediately that eye there doesn't look very realistic at all. And even if you were to add in some of these details, it still looks almost like a fish eye. You have to understand that the shape of the eye is reasonable. Although we can play with the shape of the eye, it is not a straight this shape. You can start with that shape, but our eyes always droop down and go down like that. So even if you start with that shape, you always need to put like a beak on it, and then you can choose to make them go down and droopy. You can make them look like they've got, you know, really closed eyes. Really sort of hooded eyes. And for me, it's then more about, once you've drawn your eye, it's then more about colouring that eye. So I'll just bring these big ones in because, you know, these ones are easy to colour. I'm just going to use some pencils. So I've got some pencils here, just some Prismas. The first thing I do is just ring around the edge. That's all I'm going to do here, is just ring around the edge. These are a creamy pencil. And then I'm just going to move in like this. I'm going to blend it in a bit, but not heaps. And then I'm going to ring on the inside a little bit and start bringing some out from this edge. And I may even bring a different colour in somewhere, just to add some depth to that eye. So I'll do this eye again. So there. And I might just do all the dark first, so I've got some dark rings going on because that's what normally happens. Then I'm just going to blend it with the blue, going in and out. And see how that creates light and shade? Start to make that eye look a little bit more lifelike. I often like to use pencils for that very reason. And then I can use a black to finish off in here. And then what you find with a lot of these is that there's a shadow, a light shadow, and then there's the actual eyeball. Shadowing from the lid, and then there's always a little bit of discoloration down in here and often along here, often here, and we're starting to have a reasonably defined set of eyes there, and all I've done is use a little bit of pencil. And I've not really done all that much. You know, I can add some more in. I can add really high brows. The other thing is when you're doing brows, never make them a perfect curve. They're always different. I'm doing a more anime sort of a eye there. And she's looking just that little bit sad, isn't she? And the way that you shape those can determine how that's looked upon, how the face looks in general. I usually do a few little lashes there. And for me, if I was drawing this little girl, her eyes would be almost just about done at that point. Really quick, really easy. They're really great big huge eyes compared to those. You can see the two together. If I was to do these eyes, let's say I'm just going to sharpen these pencils. And I'm going to do aqua eyes. So I've got a peacock colour, is it? Peacock blue and light aqua. Yeah, in Prisma. And this is a girl that's looking a little bit worried. So again, I'm going to ring this eye. And I'm going to bring this out a little bit. Then I'm going to bring in the light pencil and blend them. It leaves some shades of light, white, and that's already looking like a defined eye. Again, finish off the eye. Bring a little bit of realism into the eye. I often just hint at the edge of the eye there. And you've got another set of eyes done. If we were looking at using markers, let me just pull out a couple of markers and I'll do liven it up a little. Right, so I have done recently, I have a friend who has the most beautiful eyes, and her eyes literally look I'm just dotting this, right? So her eyes look a little bit like this. And then they have this amazing yellow band that blends a little bit. And then on the inside they have another ring of blue, but it's just different again. I'm just dotting that. You can see that's a very different kind of eye altogether, can't you? And if I pull out a black marker, which I've got here, and I just finish off that part, and I've already put a little bit of the eyes in, put a little bit of pink, water that down just a tad. Often with these markers you can water them down and just introduce that little bit of shading without having to do too much. And this is not watercolour paper. And you start to see a little bit more realism coming into that eye. So if I was to just dot a little bit of this black around here like this. And those are just Crayola markers. You've got another eye, she's looking quite different, quite sketchy. You know, a lot different compared to this one. And like honestly with you, from here on in, the idea is to just play with your placement. But your basic shape that you're going to look at doing an eye, for me, no matter how I shape my eyes, is to start with something like that. And how high and how curved is up to you. To then have something like this. And again, how droopy and how curved is up to you. Then to have your circle of the eye, and then to have your pupil. And that's already looking like an eye. And you can always sketch out additional details to make your eye look better than it does. Remember, practice makes perfect. And there's an eye, another one. So it's all about deciding the sort of eyes that you want, how you want to place the upper lid, where you want to put your eyelashes, where you want to put your eyebrows, how droopy you want your lids, how wide and open you want your eyes. How do we want to do this? How do we want to play with this? And like I do a sketching journal where I just sit there and sketch faces and often just play with noses and play with mouths and lips, and that is what I suggest to do. A really good book is Jane Davenport's book, Beautiful Faces. It is, I can't recommend it enough for teaching you basics, but she does Whimsy Girls and so does Tamara Laporte, and I guess for you, you need to decide whether you want to make your eyes lifelike and realistic, in which case you should do realistic drawing and have a look for realistic drawing books, or whether you just like to have a believable face. Now, a believable face can be perfectly round, can be square, can be oblong, can be heart-shaped, can be tiered, petal-shaped, you know. As long as your features are placed in the right places and in proportion to themselves, you will have your faces looking believable. So it's up to you about the sort of thing you want to do with your eyes. But there's a big difference between doing a basic eye that looks like that and having eyes that have lots of expression in them. And to be honest with you, every eye has pits, and you know, they have little dark parts that come out of the eye, and this is what gives believability. You know, this is what gives believability when you have eyes that start to show, you know, there's believability in your eyes. You might think to yourself, oh, why did she do the blue first? Well, that black doesn't look completely black now, does it? And I might even add some black in there like that. And I start changing the overall look of the eye and how it's all put together, and suddenly it comes together as looking even more believable than what it did before. Alright, so that concludes Technique Friday for this week. I hope you've enjoyed your little eye lesson from Missladypetal. Remember, learn something new today. It keeps you young. Ciao for now.